There's a lightning bolt
Wait,
that has to hit right at the moment that your identity is there so that that single cell will become you. And that has to be blinded from the mother so she can't see you.
so if we don't have enough light, we can't have that exchange.
Exactly. Then you have infertility. Turns out that this is
Oh,
what doing IVF is because there's not enough energy left in the tail of a sperm or in the egg itself to achieve this entanglement with the soul.
hello, hello, Heal Squad. We are so excited for today's episode because one of our all time favorite guests, Dr. Zach Bush, is back on the Heal Squad podcast. If you don't already know Dr. Zach Bush, he is a triple board certified physician in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. But what makes him truly groundbreaking is his work in microbiome science, regenerative farming, and systems-based healing. He is on a mission, friends, to reconnect us with our bodies and the inner wisdom we often forget that we have. So today, Dr. Zach will guide us through what really causes soul sickness. Yes, we are tackling soul sickness, friends, and how to realign with nature in a world that constantly pulls us in every other direction and completely out of sync. But first, our quote of the day from Dr. Zach himself. If we stay curious about an alternative world than we have today, we can go create that world. So let's get curious and welcome back Dr. Zach Bush. See you. It's been a minute since we've chatted, and it's funny. I'll see a video and I'll get inspired, and there were so many videos that you had been putting out on Instagram where I was inspired. I'm like, we need to have another conversation. And soul sickness, I mean, we talk about so much physical illness, and of course, that's so important. But soul sickness just seemed like such an important conversation. And I'm just so excited to have that with you.
Phenomenal. I'm glad to be on with the topic. It's an honor to be kind of a global community that's allowing this kind of information to start percolating up through human awareness. I think it's coming through all of us, not just one. So glad to be part of that field of flowers coming up.
Yeah. So, how do you define soul sickness?
Yeah, this is the and deeper understanding that's now coming as modern science, as we call it, starts to collide with ancient wisdom, and that ancient wisdom is tied into deep understandings through really stillness. Almost every wisdom has come out of stillness in caves, under stars, in nature, and it resulted in phenomenal technologies on the planet and the rest. And so we come out of a heritage in our deep human history of states of being, states of resonance, states of expression, states of creativity and technology that really far outstrip anything that we have today. And so it's easy to get tied up in microprocessing chips and all this and think that we've made some sort of revolution with a cell phone until we come to terms with the fact that the pyramids were built 12,000 years ago and were technologies that we still don't even understand how they were capturing so much energy, what they were there, how they bored so deep in the earth to build these underground systems of energetic consolidation. So there's a memory ultimately in water. There's a memory within this planet and within each of us that is literally the water structure itself. And that really resides within our modern science, realizing that the human brain doesn't have a long-term memory drive. It has short-term memory, similar to a computer with its RAM, but it doesn't have the ROM. It doesn't have the hard drive of memory in the brain. And so the memory of a human being or an animal seems to be stored outside of the neurology. And it's in this interface between water molecules and the energetic vibrations of feelings that we start to imprint experiences in our body, and that body ultimately an extension of an earth that is imprinting memory in it. And so that's the water side of the fascination with science and where it's at. That the water is now coming into this collision of what we might call a soul. And this soul is an energy field that predates your human biology with a unique identity, and then preserves that identity after you let go of the body and allows for other iterations of self. And so I really got to see
How
this.
does it exist? Sorry to interrupt you, but how does it exist before if it's our individual soul?
Yeah, exactly. So it's easier to find the other side of it, the near-death experience. So as a hospice doctor, I watched 80 patients admitted a week for 4 years to die. And so when you're watching that much death, you get to see a whole lot of those near-death experiences where somebody's crossing the veil multiple times, coming back with information, telling stories to their loved ones, telling stories to the nurses, telling stories at the bedside with the doctor. And so I got to be front lines of watching these individuals leave the body and its consciousness, sometimes at the veil of their own respiratory rate, but oftentimes in ICU settings where their brain stops, their heart stops, everything's down for 15, 20 minutes, everything's in this like low vibration state. You get enough drugs into them and everything else, and you pump them back to life with shocks to the heart and everything else. In that near-death timing, they travel the cosmos. You come back with the craziest stories of where they went, who they saw, all the ancestors they met, and the stories themselves are very captivating. So it took me actually a couple of years of being a hospice doctor until the observation came through that, whoa, the scariest thing about all of that is that their identity never leaves. And so while the cosmic journeys are interesting, how fascinating that their identity stays so intact, such that they can travel the cosmos completely separate from their human body or even their human awareness, and they're suddenly aware of the integration into everything, the integration into stardust, everything else. But they're carrying this I am. They're carrying this I am, and I experienced this, I saw this, I am in this space. So that got to be a fascination for me. And then that took me down into the embryonics, like how does an embryo form in a uterus? And that got really exciting. Like, wait, that same identity that was indelible on the backside of life has to be present before the first cell division because there's an identity shift. Before conception, the egg is actually carrying the mother's signature such that the egg can travel freely around her body, leave the ovary, travel through the perineum, which is one of the most intense environments of immune system surveillance in the entire body because of the permeability of the gut, because of the amount of microbiome there. The perineum, the inside of your body, has to be surveilled very closely. So her immune system sees the egg, sees the ovary, sees the egg, leave the ovary, sees it travel through space, over to the fallopian tube, down the fallopian tube. All of that is visible until it really hits this moment of conception. And at that moment, there has to be enough progesterone in the uterus to hide this next event from the mother. Because if the entanglement of a new identity hits that cell and the mother can still see it, she'll kill it instantly with her immune system. And so that's the programming of a mother's immune system. If somebody else's cell shows up here, kill it. That's why when we do organ transplant, we have to put people on intense immunosuppression so their immune system doesn't kill the organ. Well, the child or the embryo is a new organ. It's a new organ with a different identity. And this is, I have a different blood type than my mother. I have different cell structure things. So she had to be blind to that process. And so the egg is hers, and then the moment of conception, a new identity imprint happens and the cell starts to express something else. And so this is the soul entanglement with biology.
I'm getting chills. That's so cool.
And so it is extraordinary. It's amazing. You actually existed previous to conception, and then you were at the point of conception, which is this huge discharge of energy that happens from the egg itself. You might remember from biology that the powerhouse of the cell is the mitochondria. Mitochondria are these tiny little bacterium that discharge sunlight from large carbon molecules. We call it fat or sugar, but those are just long carbon chains that are broken down to release the energy, the stored sunlight between the carbon bonds that were put there by the chlorophyll in the green plants. And so chlorophyll takes CO2 and builds long carbon chains to store sunlight. The fat and sugar travels through the food system, eventually into one of my cells, and my mitochondria break the carbon back apart, liberating CO2. I respire that out, and I release the sunlight. So I'm a light being running on massive amounts of light energy at the moment of life. Right now, this millionth of a second, or at the beginning of conception. My average human cell has 200 mitochondria living inside of it, which is much different than what a textbook will show you, usually 2. And so that 200 mitochondria on average is this massive engine of churning out light energy in every single one of your 70 trillion human cells so that there's enough energy to live on. But that 200 mitochondria per cell pales in comparison to the egg. The egg actually has 600,000, more than 500,000 mitochondria inside of it. And they discharge light at the moment of conception. It's called the zinc flash. And you can Google this and see what it looks like under a microscope. It's this massive discharge of lightning from the cell, blinds the microscope for a moment. 600,000 mitochondria seem to be necessary to create this entanglement between a new identity that we could call a soul, which is something stable, a stable identity in the electromagnetic field of the universe. This stable identity suddenly is able to attach to biology with enough light discharge. And so it's really gives me goosebumps to imagine what that looks like in the multidimensional reality we enter. There's a lightning bolt
Wait,
that has to hit right at the moment that your identity is there so that that single cell will become you. And that has to be blinded from the mother so she can't see you.
so if we don't have enough light, we can't have that exchange.
Exactly. Then you have infertility. And it turns out that this is
Oh,
what doing IVF is because there's not enough energy left in the tail of a sperm or in the egg itself to achieve this entanglement with the soul. And so we
that
are
is
dimming the lights of humanity such that it can no longer connect to the multidimensional realm of reality.
okay. So I have followed a doctor by the name of Dr. Jack Cruz. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I know Cruz well.
And he has talked about infertility being tied to a lack of light, but I never understood the explanation the way you just explained it so easily. Um, and it explains so much because I was like, I know I'm fertile, but I was never able to conceive. I was never able to get pregnant, but I was under TV lights 20 hours a day for how many years? I was sunscreening like crazy. I was not getting the light. And now I've completely flipped my whole life. And now I'm constantly in the light, constantly storing like a squirrel. I'm storing sunlight and that is just fascinating. And I think more people really need to understand why we're having fertility issues. And you just explained it.
Yeah. And it gets deeper than that. It's not only fertility, it's everything that comes after conception is also reliant on that same reservoir of energy. And so what's happened to you is that you're, without exposing your age, I guess, in a general range of dates, which decade were you born in?
I was born in 78.
78. Okay, so in 78, you were 2 years into the introduction of glyphosate on the planet. And so glyphosate is the primary chemical herbicide used globally. Today, we use about 4 billion pounds a year into our soil and water systems. And that 4 billion pounds of the chemical toxin goes in as a water soluble molecule, so it's going into our entire water table. So this began in 1976 with broad spraying of herbicide, and it then bonds to water all over the planet, and this starts to create the soul sickness. And so soul sickness is the beginning of infertility where we can't entangle with the water, but it's also where we can't update the continual rebirth that every human has to go through. Everything that is solid, whether it's the table in front of me or my human body, is actually physical matter that's disappearing and reappearing every millionth of a second. And so the physical reality is actually not solid. The atomic physics of reality shows us that electrons and protons are disappearing and then reappearing in this incredible quantum physics reality of materialization and dematerialization. So what happens in my body, I'm disappearing 1 million times every second, and I'm reprogramming to the original design my body. And for what this looks like to a human being is I can trip and fall, I'll cut my knee. 5 days later, my knee has remembered where those cells used to be, and billions of cells that just got torn off my knee are relayed down by stem cells. I've got this whole new matrix of connective tissue, and the skin grows back to exactly where it was before. As I age, I'll lay down more scar tissue and all of that because I'm not as good at remembering the original design, but I can still, the scar doesn't happen 2 inches outside my body, and it's not happening 1 inch deep in my body. It comes back to the original level of a wound. And so this is an example of how the body is remembering the original design constantly. And if it gets detached from that original design, i.e., the energy field of my identity is not able to continuously reconnect and be updating my biology as it disappears and reappears, I'm going to start to decay in my truth. I'm going to decay in my self expression. And this is, I think, what is happening to humanity, and we call it the chronic disease epidemic, but it's actually a steady increase in the amount of static or interference between my original design and my current iteration of self. This is happening in my biology, therefore it's also happening in my neurology, therefore it's also happening in my psychology. And so I am walking around with a body that's just as detached from my original identity and purpose as my mental construct of my identity and purpose is disconnected. And so we can see this in spades in our children that are kind of in their teens right now. Our teen population has never had such a high level of anxiety as they do today. We have this massive penetration of mental health crisis, and it's anxiety of, I don't want to go outside because I don't know who I am. And I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe in an environment where I'm suddenly interacting with lots of other people. And COVID came along just in time to isolate those kids even further, leaving them in a space of extreme difficulty of reintegrating into colleges and the rest. So these generations are getting more and more challenged to connect daily to that soul imprint of I am. I am. You only have to hang out with a 2-year-old to feel what it feels like to have an I am that is clear. But a 45-year-old today is struggling and is having to spend so much time finding the I am. We've got 500 ayahuasca ceremonies every weekend in Los Angeles right now so that a couple of generations of people can just remember what it feels like to be me. That's the level
Mm.
of the crisis. That's not necessarily a conscious breakthrough. That's a desperate call for help. That's a desperate call of humanity wanting to reconnect to source. I got to remember who I am before I die, or else I will have lived this life without my full purpose and activation. And so we're in this brink of a loss of energy in the cell that interacts with the water and its memory of the original design, and the genetics that come from that memory, and the body that will then be expressed from that imagination of nature.
That resonates so much because I remember after I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I remember saying to this kinesiologist I was working with, he's like, "How are you feeling, kiddo?" And I'm like, "I'm just dying to be me." And that was kind of like the beginning of my awakening, my exploration of like so many things. And that's why I kept saying the brain tumor was such a gift because it stopped me in my tracks and I had to start reevaluating. And then, of course, multiple illnesses had to continue to hit me in the head and or the gut, wherever, until I really started making even bigger changes, like just the light. But when you talk about glyphosate being introduced in 76, I wonder how, if it's in the water, like we can only do so much with the dirty dozen or the clean list that EWG puts out for, what you should buy organic or not. We can only do so much organic. It can only have so much ion gut support, to help me in my journey. If we're just completely fucked with the water supply, what do we do? How is our body going to have the support that it needs to do what it's supposed to do?
This is the science behind that ION product that you just mentioned. So ION is an acronym for Intelligence of Nature, and our team has an incredible conviction that nature has never allowed a wound that doesn't already have a solution. She's not going to allow an injury unless there's already a solution. And so just like sit with that tonight as you go to sleep. Like there's nothing happening in your body that nature hasn't already created a solution for.
But
And
the
that's a
only thing, let me ask one thing. I believe that, but how does it apply to things that we've created? Like it's one thing for nature's problems. I know nature has solutions to all of its problems, but we've created so many problems with technology that was not maybe in the plan. I don't know. Or was it?
Well, we do love to identify ourselves outside of nature. And so if you look up the Oxford English Dictionary definition of nature, one of those is everything in the firmament of the earth, including minerals, plants, animals, as opposed to humans or anything humans have made. So in our English language, we like to write ourselves out of nature and anything we've made out of nature. But the fact is, nothing is outside of nature. Nature is a description of all things within the cosmos and the complex interactions that allow for physics and biology to occur. Nature is everything. And so while we may be oppositional to the thrive state of nature right now, we might be causing a wound within nature. It doesn't leave our behavior or our products outside of nature. And so what we see with glyphosate, which is a potent deactivator of the light. And so our laboratory has been working for 15 years to understand all of the mechanisms of actions of glyphosate on human biology. And we're working to release the most definitive paper of that 15 years later this year But that paper, I think, will be a stake in the ground for regulators and lawmakers and everything else to say, this is the moment we can no longer deny that we know exactly how this chemical has undermined human biology globally. From earthworms to cattle to humans, this thing has ignited a fire of chronic disease and disconnect from the original design. So we have done something really dark with glyphosate. But with the science of ion, what we see is that nature planted in her soils 60 million years ago the antidote to glyphosate. So the chemical we're spraying to kill her soils today had an antidote planted 60 million years ago by nature. And this is my conviction. Nature has never allowed an injury to occur that it does not already have a solution, and she imagined these solutions long, long ago. Because we're not the first cataclysmic thing to show up on the planet. Many cataclysms have induced massive extinctions on this planet, and nature has the antidote for it all. There's many toxins that nature does that do extreme damage. There's carcinogens. There's everything that breaks the gut barrier. There's acid pools that come spewing out of volcanoes and poison the oceans for millions of years. This planet has been in a deep state of wounding over and over and over again, and nature has the solution every time, and she always comes back more intelligent, more biodiverse, more connected than ever before. And the diversification of this planet leads to higher and higher states of beauty, which are expressing higher and higher states of intelligence of the cosmos. And so we have to release this belief that what we're doing is somehow beyond nature's capacity, or that this planet somehow is being wounded by humans like it's never been wounded before. No, this is actually a relatively mild wounding compared to what's happened in the past. And so nature's already ready for her rebirth to happen, and she's mounting it already. Our nonprofits are working extensively in Africa, Middle East, etc., around the rebirth canal of the planet. The birth canal of the planet is basically this east coast of Africa, and that birth canal then leads to this rebirth process. Every 20,000 years, there's a small rebirth, and every million years, you get a bigger rebirth. And so there's these cycles of desertification and rebirth, desertification, rebirth, loss of biology, rebirth of biology that the planet is doing. And so while we love to stimulate a fear, guilt, shame paradigm on the human experience, I would premise that there is nothing that we need to fear, be guilty for, or shamed. We just have an opportunity to actually witness what's happening. We are witnessing our own extinction now. We're witnessing the extinction of tens of thousands of species. We've accelerated the normal rate of extinction by 10,000x over the last 50 years with these chemicals that we're talking about. And so this rapid acceleration of extinction is happening because we're decreasing the amount of light, the amount of life force on the planet with these chemical interventions of antibiotics. So the herbicides, pesticides, and antibiotics from your doctor are all functioning as antibiosis. These are chemicals that disrupt the relationships that make life possible. That's what biosis means, the relationships that make life possible. So antibiotic is against the relationships that make life possible. And so we now know that that's quite literal. You wipe out the microbiome in the gut, and the human heals less fast and starts to accumulate injury, and the disease occurs. And so this is the balance that we're in. But I do want everybody to understand that there was something put in her soil 60 million years ago that when ingested at the same time as the glyphosate residues in your food and water system, not only do you become resilient to the glyphosate, you actually get stronger because of the presence of the glyphosate. The tight junctions, the ATP production, everything goes up beyond where it was before the injury when these fossil soils are utilized. And so what we're seeing is nature is showing us that if we all focus back on creating biodiverse soil systems globally, we will almost instantly erase the damage done by our herbicide and pesticide antibiotic era. The nature is under our feet, and she's ready to not only forgive, but actually take us to a place we've never been in vitality for the injury that has occurred. And this happens all over the body. You can run down a flight of stairs, you do millions of microfractures to your bone. You do any weight-bearing exercise, you go jog, millions of fractures to your microbone, microstructure of your bone. Over the next 4 hours, the fractures are cleaned up, osteoblasts come in, repair the little microfractures. By the end of the day, your bone is stronger than it was before you went for the run. And so it requires the injury to inspire greater resilience and greater strength. And this is why people go to the gym. You go to the gym, you're doing millions of injuries to muscle fibers all over the body. That's why you're stiff the next day if you overdo it. And so there's a lot of injury being done. And in response to the injury, there's more muscle, more strength, more resilience, more flexibility from the yoga, whatever it is. And so you're inducing just the right amount of stress so that the body gets stronger, not weaker. And that's what glyphosate can become if we will acknowledge at the governmental, regulatory, and industry levels what it does. We can then understand how we can use that to our advantage to overcome this era. And as we stop spraying the chemicals and as we allow biodiversity to come back in our soil systems, the soils are going to heal us. The soil systems are going to put the nutrients within the food that are the antidote to these chemicals, the PFAS and these forever molecules that are freaking us out, the microplastics, all of that has solutions in the microbiome and the complex ecosystems of the soils of the earth. And as we stop spraying, all of that's going to come back to life in a very quick fashion. We have farmers all over the world that already have figured this out and are becoming part of the solution, and they're growing biodynamic farms everywhere. I just landed here in Cape Town. I'm up in Stellenbosch area. I'm at a biodynamic vineyard from Farmer Angus, and he's been farming this land, which has been under intense chemical abuse for generations, and he has created an absolute Garden of Eden here, an oasis of integrated species where the chickens and the cows are taking care of the soils beneath the vineyard, and they're part of this living cycle of increasing biodiversity every year. And so the farmers have figured out. There's consumers that are figuring it out, and now we need to map our macroeconomic and systems within our government and industry and kind of nation state levels to align with these regenerative practices. Because right now, transportation, energy, the way in which economics is doled out at the bank level, all of these are right now against the change. There's all kinds of traps and pitfalls. So it's not like we can blame the farmers and tell them that's their problem. They're stuck in a trap of chemical dependence because of the way that we've built our financial and regulatory systems. And so we need to bring all of these systems into alignment, and the farmers already know how to do what they do. The farmers are always the most intelligent, most incredible problem solvers on the earth because they spend more time looking at their earth than any other industry does. And so I trust the farmers globally to do the right thing. We just need to create the environment where they can make that decision to do the right thing.
Wow. Well, the other part is pharma really going to allow any of these changes because they benefit the most from all of it? We're going to take a second to acknowledge the incredible supporters that help us bring you guys this content. If you've been listening, you all know that I'm obsessed with linen and cotton sheets, not only because it's a great fabric, but it's the best for our health. Whether you're thinking healing frequencies, it also is temperature controlled. I even traveled here to this movie set that I'm shooting a film at with my own 100% cotton sheets that I got at Macy's. And right now is the perfect time to buy it because Macy's big home sale is going on now. You can get 40% off linen sheets and amazing brands that they have, not just bedroom must-haves, everything you need for your home upgrade, from all-clad 7-piece stainless steel cookware sets or Shark vacuums, all the amazing deals that you want, you can get up to 40% off. I've linked some of the items that I'm picking in my wish list below so you guys can see and get your inspo on. Don't forget, Macy's Big Home Sale is going on now until August 13th in store or online at Macys.com. Happy shopping, friends. So when you said antibiotic, it was interesting because I never, ever, ever considered what antibiotic actually meant. And when you talk about the farmers knowing what to do, my biggest thing was, yeah, the financial system and the pharma system, there's so many things that need to change. It seems overwhelming. It seems like it's impossible. Do you think that this is actually going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's inevitable because the pharma paradigm and our current economic paradigms are in utter collapse. And so the U.S. dollar is about to go bankrupt for the first time in a couple hundred years. And so we're really at this brink of complete failure of the systems that have brought us to this state of chemical dependence and chemical abuse on the planet. And so it's an inevitable change, and the chemical companies absolutely know it. And so the rush that the chemical companies have been in to find biologics is what they're calling them, but it's basically chemicals that are made by nature instead of chemicals that disrupt nature. And so the biologics that are going to replace the herbicides, pesticides, and the rest, and the chemical fertilizers, there's a mad rush for it because the demand is going through the roof and is outstripping the provision of smaller companies that are stepping up with the solutions. And so there are many companies that are offering alternatives to glyphosate and the rest now through things that are less toxic and harmful to the biology of the earth, because they're actually biologics. These are things that the microbes of the soil are making, plants are making, things like this. And so it's going back to like herbalism instead of allopathic chemical medicine. And so that's already happening, and there's a rush for it at every level. Pharmaceutical companies, as far back as like 2005, or I guess no, it was a little later than that, maybe 2010, I was in my clinic out in rural Virginia, and I was used to all these pharma reps coming in to tell me what the greatest drugs were and all this stuff. It was just like how things happen. And one of these pharma reps came in from Abbott Pharmaceuticals with a box of granola bars and said, "Hey, this is the new Abbott granola bar." And I was like, "What?" And that was my sign that things are failing in pharma. If pharmaceutical companies are realizing they've got to diversify their portfolios over to food because they're not making the revenues that they used to on the drugs, this is a very good sign. And so I just want to remind everybody, you are the pharmaceutical companies. There's not a single pharmaceutical company in the world that can survive without all of you putting your dollars there. You could withdraw your money from the pharmaceutical industry instantaneously if you will reconnect to nature. And so she's got your solutions. And if you want to dive into the ION website, you'll see solutions for sleep, for brain focus, for energy, pickup, and the gut supply and the skin supply and everything else. So you got so many avenues, and that's just one company offering you biologic solutions. And so we can withdraw our support for the pharmaceutical companies if we want to see the paradigm change. But that's going to take all of you deciding you're going to go. Now, if you don't, and you decide, no, you know what, I really like my alprazolam for my sleep, and I like my the benzos and the things for when I get anxious, and I really like my regimen that I've got for my kind of pickup in the afternoon, and you got your routine down. That's fine too, because no judgment on it. That's the path that you and billions of other people are picking right now. And what it's going to show you is ultimately that you have a self. I believe that path of the pharmaceuticals are going to take you to your knees so that you can find out how beautiful you are. Every single path leads to Rome. It's that kind of old adage, all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to you. And I saw this again and again at the bedside of hospice all of the time. Everybody finds themselves. And sometimes it's in the moment of their last breath, and they suddenly see the other side of the veil, and there's this utter release of all of the human stories, and there's a sudden connection of source to body. And that's when they go into these deep respiratory cycles. We call them Kussmaul breathing. And it happens so often in hospice. It's in the last few hours or sometimes for days in the death cycle. The person will go unconscious. They're now in that extremely expanded state of the I am. They're experiencing the entire universe. They're experiencing the history of not just this life, but many, many lifetimes. And they're going through it, and they're going through it. And they might come back and tell you about it, or they might just stay in it. But during this time, they go into a respiratory pattern known as Kussmaul breathing. And it is the most stunning thing to see. I've seen little bodies doing this that are so atrophied they can't lift their heads. This is, one patient comes to mind. She'd had cancer for years, pancreatic cancer, and she had gotten herself down to 58 pounds, digesting every molecule of muscle on her body and fat on her body, and she was a skeleton with this giant smile and these bright blue eyes all the way to the end, and never a complaint. And she just knew she was on the planet for all the right reasons to the right moment. And she knew that her cancer wasn't going to kill her. She knew she would release her soul when she was ready. But at 58 pounds, you literally don't have enough energy to lift an arm off the table. And yet suddenly, in this unconscious state of expanding to the I am, she would take these massive deep breaths, bigger than I've seen anybody do in breath work in yoga classes or anything else. Huge total body breath in, and then a massive expiration. And she'll do it powerfully for 2 minutes, 8 minutes, sometimes 60 minutes at a time. I've seen patients that sometimes do this for hours, and then they stop breathing. And they will have that breath hold for 2 minutes, 4 minutes, and then they suddenly are breathing again, and they're doing that intense breath work again. We do breath work at the end of life, I believe, because the soul, suddenly in that sense of self-identity, suddenly realizing they still have a human body to feel in, just want to feel another breath. That soul is connected to a body that is breathing, and it must be ecstasy, because when you do that much breath work, the amount of DMT that you release from your brain And from that pineal gland and everything is just beyond. And so you're on your best drug trip ever. You're in the best psychedelic experience of being completely connected to everything. And so that soul is breathing in a human body to have the finite experience of I am everything right now in a finite body. And I'm going to let go of that body in a moment and connect to everything at once. But right now I'm here. And I like the feeling of laying in a bed and breathing hard. It's worth another breath to stay. And I may never speak to another person, but I will take another breath so I can feel that again. That's the intensity at which the I am wants to feel. And that's where you guys can start to really change our addiction to a pharmaceutical industry or a chemical food industry or any form of the addictions that we move through in our universal abandonment disorder that we share as humans. That abandonment disorder leads to addiction. And we can let go of those addictions at a moment in which we realize everything is perfect. And so whether you're on a pharma journey or you're on your permaculture natural farm journey or you're on an exhausted single parent journey that I've felt before, those journeys will take you to your knees ultimately. It doesn't matter which path you pick. You will be taken to your knees in complete exhaustion and complete fatigue of trying to maintain the stories that the world has handed you, trying to maintain all of the roles you were told you had to play to be valuable to this humanity. All of those stories fall away when you are finally out of energy. And so you will find that path. And I have absolutely no judgment on which of those paths you're on because it's irrelevant to which one you've picked. But you are on a fast track to collapse and you will find self. And in that moment, we might feel enough to change the human experience altogether. And so the invitation ultimately is, can we die together today? What would it feel like if we let the story die of why we needed chemical farming, why we needed chemical pharmaceuticals, why we needed war, why we needed to radicalize our children against the children that live across the fence so that they would kill each other for another generation? Why did we make those stories? It's a deep, deep human wound that we can find in there. And in there, we will find the antidote that nature laid because she's never allowed an injury that hasn't had a solution already made. And so we are here at this point, I think, to be part of this experiment. What happens when humankind goes to its extinction threshold, looks over the side of the cliff, and decides we're going to breathe together? And we can do our Kusumal breathing now. And we can start to picture a different humanity and a different relationship to biology such that we reintegrate and stop the story that we got abandoned, stop the story and behavior of scarcity that comes from that abandonment, stop the addictions that are the result of that scarcity, begin the healing that is this reconnection to the abundance of an earth that has reimagined itself into a higher state of consciousness and intelligence with every iteration. I want to stay and play, but I'm also okay with just becoming the I am again and explore my next iteration on a distant part of the cosmos. It's okay. The journey is okay. If we all die, it's okay because every other human has also died. And so let's go. Let's go do this thing. And if we need to take ourselves to the brink, let's go to the brink. Let's look over the edge and see if we can stay on the edge of the cliff long enough to reimagine ourselves.
Wow. Do you feel like you found yourself?
I get glimpses of it. And the amazing thing is that there's enough static in my field. And uh, looking back, I just went through one of the most massive transformations of my life just in the last 4 months or so. And that transformation has got me looking at my whole life from a completely different perspective that I didn't even know was possible. And looking at my life from a different perspective, the reason I kept falling out of the I am was for the first 30 years of my life, I was playing a head game. I was trying to build everything in this analytical space of the mind that was relying on constructs that were abstract. And so my value systems, my monetary system that I was building in, the corporate environment, and ultimately the pharmaceutical educational system that I was involved with, I was designing chemotherapy drugs by the end of my 17 years in academia. All of that was built out of my head. And so I had built these abstract realities of cancer is warring against humans and humans have to war against cancer. It's a silly story. And yet I had totally bought into it. I had written articles on it. I had written giant NIH grants about it. I had totally adopted the war against biology, the war against cancer, the war against obesity, the war against diabetes. I had bought the whole thing, and I was playing a beautiful role in it. And in hindsight, my gosh, what chaos was there. No wonder I couldn't find self because I didn't even know what that would look like or feel like because I was so busy fulfilling all of these roles and merits and marks of achievement to be a good doctor, to be a good dad, to be a good citizen. So I was pouring myself out until I finally died. I brought myself to my knees by 2008, major depression for a year and a half, had some passive suicidality, the whole thing, and then had a near-death experience, not by suicide, but it actually was very similar to the suicide approach that I had imagined, which was a drowning. And I ended up in a river in a car accident and went through this near-death experience. And that was when I started to shift out of my head finally. And it was enough to shatter my mental construct of this is the world I live in. And that moment of being outside the body, that moment of being was all I needed to realize there was a different place to live in. And so I snapped back in the body and live this 15-year journey now of being in the heart space and trying to build from this sense of everything is love, everything is, and over again, iterating on that, I created more and more unstable systems. And it's only in these last few months that I finally shattered my heart enough times. Heartbreak through 2 marriages, heartbreak through ups and downs of my companies, heartbreaks from companies that went out of business, projects that failed, heartbreaks from failed relationships to my colleagues and my co-founders and everything else. So I'd gone through so many cycles of what we call heartbreak that I finally shattered that. And this year I walked into a new space in my body, and it's the stillness within the womb. And so it turns out that I should have figured this out 25 years ago when I started birthing babies, that the womb, the only place that the woman can allow creation to come through is in the one place that she blinds herself to, and it has to be in complete stillness. If we were supposed to birth things from our heart, the womb would be up in our chest. If we were supposed to birth things from our mind, we'd have a womb up in our head. There's only one place that has the energetic womb, and it's both in men and women, and it lies between the belly button and the floor of the pelvis. And this, in Chinese medicine and science, it's called the danqian. It is the site of the soul. And so, interestingly, this soul sickness that we're talking about is solved by getting into the soul space, settling out of your head and the chaos there, settling out of the heart so that you can get out of the chaotic flow of a torrent of energy that flows from source to everything that's ever created. That's called unconditional love. It's an inevitable torrent of energy. And it's a beautiful thing. It's the thing that makes life worth living. But you try to build your house and your companies and your marriages in the middle of that torrent of energy, it's going to be unstable. You're going to create codependencies. You're going to create all kinds of false realities because you're not still. You're not allowing nature to find you. You're not in the I am state. You're defining yourself by all of your interrelationships emotionally and the feeling state of everything. And that's your self-identity. That's not the I am. The I am is a still place that's preceded the experience of being human and will postcede the experience of being human. And so this is where we can start to live from. And so right now I'm in a re-meeting space. I'm re-meeting myself as a human being tied to an I am that's been here forever and can look up at the human heart, and I can use it so much more gently and so much more eloquently when I'm not trying to live inside of it. I can see what its purpose is. My purpose is to see beauty everywhere and let source energy that we call unconditional love, let that frequency connect to everything I witness beauty in. And that's my role in nature now, is simply to be the witness in relationships, to be the witness in my companies, to be the witness in the walk that we'll take in the vineyard this evening. Be witness to the beauty and let the heart do its work, but don't build in there. You can't create from there unless it is more false realities, more codependencies that you're after. But to release all of that, getting out of your mind, getting out of your heart, getting into your stillness, now nature can use your mind to create things that you can't imagine, create ideas and pathways that can open up when you're still. When you get out of your heart, you can actually start to understand that there is no more love to be added to you. You don't need to go find somebody else. It's an infinite amount of love already came to you in the womb when you connected an infinite soul that is a fractal of source, probably, right to that egg. And in that connection, you were connected to all of the unconditional love you would ever need. And so you need to stop looking outside of yourself and feel within yourself, as I am trying to do today. I am trying to connect deeply to that flow of energy within me that is life force, and then witness the beauty of that love coming through a human heart to itself. And then witness the way in which my mind can find patterns and see things that I couldn't see 10 years ago because of my position has changed. I can see from a distance much greater than I could see when I was in the middle of the torrent of my mind or the torrent of my heart. So it's an invitation to all of us to follow that ancient Chinese practice of get down to the danqian, get down into the stillness of the body and start to work from the womb. and let nature work through that space and create things that you can't even imagine. The greatest creations you have to blind yourself to. The woman blinds herself to her own womb with the progesterone, so something miraculous can happen within her that is beyond her mind or her heart to create. We've actually seen quite the opposite, right? In fertility clinics and in my own experience, if a woman will become fixated on the desire to have a baby, the likelihood of that baby coming goes down. She can fixate it in her mind, and she can mentalize it, she can put it on her dream board, and she can write a whole bunch of stuff, and she can create the crib and the name and the things, mentalize it into, and it becomes more and more difficult for the body to create that opportunity for that baby to come. And then she can love it. She can just unconditionally love that child and get into the spiritual state of singularity and oneness, and fertility becomes more difficult and more difficult. It's not until you surrender completely and realize, well, of course the life is going to come to the womb if it's intended to. If nature is going to express through my womb, it's going to happen. The relationship would be there to seed that event. My event would be received by the womb. The womb would intertangle with the soul at the moment of that discharge of light of a sperm and an egg meeting. Everything would have to happen if nature intends it. And as you surrender that, you can realize between now and that possibility, you have to birth yourself 1,000,000 times a second. And so start birthing that. Focus in on what is the I am I'm originally designed in and will return to. Can I align myself with that? And that will increase your fertility. Birth yourself today and rebirth again the next second and the next second and the next second. And when we go into that deep personal journey, that's where we start to eliminate all the static that was disrupting and creating the soul sickness that we're all suffering through.
That is profound. And I agree completely because I know that I'm at my best when I completely surrender. But fear does creep in, and then patterns that existed come back. And for the average person, there is so much fear. Like you mentioned, a single mom or someone who's, barely making ends meet. Surrendering is so incredibly challenging. I always say it's easier for me because I have more resources. So I can sit in the stillness, I can sit and surrender, and I watch things happen. I don't even try and things will happen. And I'm like, is it because I've laid all the seeds down all these years? And now that's why it's happening. If I hadn't done all the things I did before, would they be coming to me as easily? I don't know the answer. All right, friends, we're going to pause right here because Dr. Zach and I get deep and profound, and we are going to come back tomorrow with part 2 of this conversation because we just couldn't stop talking. I can't wait for you guys to hear more of that tomorrow. We're going to talk about how to get comfortable being uncomfortable, how our suffering can really lead to our rebirth. Big, I know, but it was beautiful. And I learned a lot and was really inspired, and I think you guys will be too. So friends, until next time, be nice people, make good choices, and be present. Hey, Heal Squad. We have been on quite the journey together, and we're hearing from so many of you just how much this show is helping you heal and get better, and it makes us feel so good. We love, love, love it, and we just ask that you don't keep it to yourself. Spread the message and share the show or your favorite episode with your friends. And if you want to help us even more, you can leave us a 5-star rating and a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and follow us on Instagram at Heal Squad. You can also DM us anytime because we love connecting with you. And finally, you can also join us on Patreon for our monthly live heal events with world-class healers and ad-free episodes exclusive only to Patreon and our Super Heal Squad for as little as $10 a month. So go to patreon.com/Heal Squad to join. Getting better isn't easy, friends, but as I say all the time, it's a whole lot easier if we can do it together. We love you all so much, and we love doing this thing called life with you.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or MariaMenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.